So here I am, I found myself in the rough. I thought it would be a good chance to maybe do the first in our series of videos on consistency in equipment. So golfers only ever want three things, right? They want distance, they want accuracy, and they want consistency. So we'll start and talk about how equipment can affect your consistency. And one of the things we're going to talk about today, or rule one if you like, is yardages. How far do you hit each club? And consistency of distance is hugely important. The pros you see on TV, their distance control is absolutely on or to the inch. It's incredible. And if we can get better at controlling our distances, or even knowing roughly how far our clubs travel, it's really important. I think there's a perception out there that people tend to assume that they hit about 10 yards between each club, and it's not true. So if you're a slower swinger, your yardaging carry could be anything like 5 yards, it could be 6 yards, 7 yards, something like that. If you're a harder hitter, it may well be more like 11, 12, 13 yards. So the difference between the harder swingers and the slower swingers as the distance gap. So that's really important to be aware of. So don't just assume if you hit your 7 iron, whatever it is, 120 yards, don't just add on 10 or take off 10 for the other clubs. The other thing to be aware of is as you get towards the longer irons, which are harder to hit, they've got less loft on them, they tend to have a reduced distance gap between them. So if you are 10 yards between your 9 to your 8 to your 7, as you move to the 6 and the 5 and the 4, you might start to see, or you probably will start to see, a drop off in the carry distance between 7 to 6, 6 to 5. So rather than 10 yards, it might become 8 yards, it might become 7 yards. And then to the next club, it might become 7 or 6 yards. So that's something else to be aware of. And as you get towards that longer end of the bag in terms of the irons, that's when you might start to see the drop off so significant that actually the carry distance doesn't go any further. So your 5 or your 4 might not go any further than your 5 in terms of carry. It might roll on a little bit more, so you might get a bit more total distance out of it. But you know, you're starting to see a big decrease in the amount of carry distance between those irons, and that's when you might start to consider a more lofty club, like a hybrid or 11 wood or a 9 wood or a 7 wood, something like that, to actually help you get the height and the distance extra that you can't get with the iron. Bearing in mind that those woods and those hybrids are typically a little bit longer in the shaft, so it's easier to create a little bit more speed with them. So that's another thing to start considering about that end of the bag. The other thing that will make a huge difference is golf ball. If you've got a bag full of lake balls or your mate's golf balls or the range ball you nicked off the driving range, then you know, when you're playing one ball to the next, if you take one out, you know, and you hit it and you lose it and you pull one out of your bag, it's completely different. That will make an enormous difference to how far you hit it. Okay, so there's no way you're going to start to get any consistency between or knowledge of how far you hit the club, because you're using a totally different piece of equipment in the golf ball. So be aware of that. The other thing I meant to mention is the people's perception on how far they hit it is often somewhere in between their total distance and their carry distance. It's very rare that people unless they spend a lot of time and attention paying attention to it, it's rare that they actually know how far they carry it, which is a really important number to know, because if you need to go over something like water or sand or heather, then that's obviously going to get you in a lot of trouble if you get that wrong. So that's important. The other thing is keep your grooves clean, especially on your wedges. How the club makes contact with the ball and how it flies off is hugely influenced by how clean you keep the clubs. If it's clean one shot and then it's dirty the next, the reaction and how the ball takes off and the amount of spin it has on it will affect the distance it goes. All right, so you're trying to prevent getting it what they call a flyer, where the ball takes off with a lot less spin and therefore travels a lot further. So be aware of that. So I think that's it pretty much with distance control, yardages. Know your clubs. You can do sessions. We run sessions if that helps. With regards to actually working out how far you hit each club, hugely beneficial session. We always do it for people who've had fittings with us, and we actually do a test run on their clubs to work out how far they hit it before they actually go out on the golf course with their new clubs. Hugely beneficial session, but you can book them separately, or you can do it yourself as well. The other thing to actually check on your clubs is actually check the lofts. Okay, the loft, actually the difference between the loft between each club can change, especially if you have forged clubs, which can move quite a bit as well. So kind of a little bit of a maintenance. I would probably encourage people to actually check the lofts on their clubs once a year, you know, just before the season starts. Just double check where they are, make sure they haven't moved too much, and at the same time maybe check your yardages and your distances. Obviously when it gets cold compared to hot weather, if you're at sea level or altitude, these things all change. But if you can at least start with a base set of yardages for all your clubs, and they won't be, like I say, 10 yards. They might be 7, okay, and it might be odd numbers. You might have a very specific, oh, I hit my 6 iron 176 yards, yeah. That's important to know, yeah, and at least then you can work from there, and you know that if you give it a little bit extra or you take a little bit off it, you can start to work backwards and forwards with that knowledge. But start from a good base, and that's a really good thing to do. So there you go. I hope that helps. We'll do rule 2 on consistency in equipment in the next video. So I hope that helps. If you need any help, then please get in contact and we'll speak to you soon. Cheers now.